Hello, and thank you for watching this video on DPX vPlus Enterprise Backup and Recovery for Microsoft 365. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, I use Microsoft 365, but why would I need to have a backup solution for the data that's already protected by Microsoft in the cloud? If that's you, you're not alone. According to a recent Enterprise Strategy Group report, 1 in 4 businesses don't believe they need to back up Microsoft 365 data. Many people, when it comes to cloud providers and the shared responsibility of that data, they believe that as the software as a service provider, Microsoft takes care of protecting the data from data loss. Though Microsoft does take on the responsibility of application uptime and underlying infrastructure, and it does provide many built-in features that feel like backups, none of them really provide what is truly needed when it comes to data protection and disaster recovery. What Microsoft 365 provides is simply a promise that they will not lose your data, but not a promise that you can recover your data. They provide protection against loss of service due to hardware failure or natural disasters, and their recycling bin provides short-term protection against user and admin error, but only for a very limited time of 30 days. Now, what happens if someone accidentally deletes an important file or an email and is unaware of that mistake? When they go back to try and find it, say a month later, the recycling bin has already been emptied and the file is gone for good. This issue is intensified when the file is missing from Microsoft OneDrive. Once a file is accidentally missing, or God forbid corrupted by ransomware or malware, that deletion or that infection is then synchronized with all connected devices. Microsoft's limited data protection also offers no protection against expired licenses, cloud infrastructure outages, and then when talking about Microsoft Teams, which has grown incredibly popular during the pandemic, an extra layer of complexity is introduced. Teams is not a self-contained application. Data generated in Teams actually resides in other applications like Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive. And this makes it difficult to properly track that data and ensure that the data, that shared data, is adequately protected. Now, this is where vPlus comes in. Now, what we're looking at here is the DPX vPlus dashboard. You'll notice we've logged into the web-based GUI using the IP address of the virtual machine. As far as architecture, really quickly, a vPlus instance consists of 2 mechanisms. The first is the vPlus server. This is the management console, the brains behind the operation, the IP address that we have used to log into the web GUI. The second is a vPlus node. The node is the data mover. During backup and restore jobs, the data itself, the backup data, resides on the node in what we call staging space, while it's moved from Microsoft 365 to the backup destination, or vice versa during a restore. In most cases, the node itself is deployed as a separate virtual machine, but for smaller customers, the server and node can reside on the same virtual machine. That's actually how this particular demo lab is set up. Depending on the size of your environment, say the number of users in your Microsoft 365 environment, you might have additional local nodes to assist with load balancing during backup jobs. You can scale out depending on the size of your environment to deploy multiple vPlus nodes for load balancing. Now, let's talk about backup destinations quickly. When we're talking about Microsoft 365, there are several different options when it comes to backup destinations. You'll first see file system. A local file system, a CIF share, an NFS share, can be mounted on that vPlus node and presented as the backup destination. You'll see that's one instance right here. For Microsoft 365, we also support object storage. Perhaps there's an S3 bucket. You'll notice over here we have S3 compatible Google Cloud Storage, Microsoft Azure, as well as OpenStack. If you have one of these destinations available to use for your backup destination, that can be a target for your Microsoft 365 data as well. Once we have a destination defined, whether again that's file system, object storage, even our own Catalogic vStore, if you are a DPX customer, you can use your vStore destination as a backup target. You can go ahead and you can register your Office 365 environment. So under this Cloud tab, you see service providers. where we have a few options when it comes to actually registering your Microsoft 365 environment. You can go ahead and manually create this service provider by providing a name, providing a tenant ID, as well as the client ID and the client secret. If you have this information, it's pretty easy to go ahead here and enter all of that and manually connect to your Microsoft 365 environment. The other option is to utilize this setup assistant, which will simply walk you through step-by-step process for logging in, granting permissions, all the way through to connecting to each of those resources in Microsoft 365. Once you have registered your Microsoft 365 environment, this will kick off what we call an index job. That index job will go ahead and identify all of the users, the groups, the sites, the teams that are included in your Microsoft 365 environment. Once you have those users available, you can begin to protect this data. As far as an ad hoc or an on-demand job, this is as easy as selecting or finding the user, the group, the sites, the teams that you want to protect, and over on the right-hand side, clicking Backup. From here, you can manually select the different resources that you'd like to include in this backup. You can choose all of them. You can choose a single resource or a handful of them. And once you click Backup here, let's just give an Exchange mailbox backup, for example. This is actually going to pass down to this task console, and you will see a backup process begin. Again, during this job, the data is being collected by the vPlus node from your Microsoft 365 environment, taking a snapshot of Enrico's mailbox and storing that data in the backup destination, which in this case is a local file system. What's really great about these particular backups is these are all agentless backups as well as incremental forever backups. So what that means is once you have a full backup completed for, say, a mailbox or a Teams or a OneDrive destination, every subsequent backup after that first full is going to be performing incremental at the file level. So in the case of this mailbox, the next time I run this backup, it will be only taking a snapshot of the new or changed emails. We'll go ahead and let this run, but that's an example of an on-demand backup job. The other option, and mostly what our end users are going to be using when utilizing vPlus for Microsoft 365, are backup SLAs. Backup SLAs will allow you to have scheduled backup jobs targeted towards groups of users, groups of teams, groups of sites and groups. In this particular instance, you'll notice we have several backup policies here. I'll go ahead and create a new one just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So let's go ahead and give this a name. We'll just name it test. A few different things that we can do to define what exactly we're looking to include in this backup policy. You'll notice we do have the ability to do auto assignment. So if I were to automatically, or if I were to select this Microsoft 365 environment, what this will allow me to do is have new users, new teams, or new groups, or new sites automatically added to this policy, depending on how we're actually setting up these resources in this policy. For now, I'll just unselect that just so I can show you manually how we select those things. So from the features tab here, this is where we're going to actually choose what resources are to be included in this backup. If, say, for example, in this policy, I want to take a snapshot of users' Exchange, their mailbox, their archive, their calendars, their contacts. From there, I can go down to the Users tab and manually select the users that I want included in this policy. Do I want every user in my Office 365? Do I want individual users in here? And then from there, I can scroll down a little further to the rule where it will define what is the destination for these backups. In this policy, are we going to be pointing this backup to our local file system, to an object storage destination? What's the retention look like? How many copies are we keeping? How many days are we keeping those copies? And then finally, we can assign this to a schedule. Maybe this is a daily schedule. On a daily basis, I want to protect these users' Exchange. Maybe I can have a second schedule that is running on a monthly basis that's doing archive to an object storage destination. Whatever you'd like to do in terms of your scheduling, it's very granular and you can define that here. Once you have that policy defined, again, those particular users will be protected based off of that schedule. Okay, so we've talked about both an on-demand and a scheduled backup job. And now finally, recovery. Now when it comes to recovery with Office 365, there are several instances where recovery is needed. One of the major instances is when an entire user's mailbox or maybe an entire site is unreachable or corrupted or it's lost. In order to do a major disaster recovery restore, you'll either search for that user, search for that site, go over to the restore button here, and this is where we can restore an entire, from a user's perspective, an entire mailbox, an entire OneDrive, entire calendar, right? Again, more for the major disaster recovery scenarios. For the most part with Office 365 or Microsoft 365, recoveries, those day-to-day recoveries are much more granular. Situations where individual files or emails or folders or chat messages are missing. How do you go ahead and recover those types of things? So in an instance where, say, a user's file or user email is missing, say for example Enrico has lost an email, what I'm able to do with vPlus is go into Enrico, his user. I can scroll down to this area where it's showing backup history and go to the protected data tab. This protected data tab is going to show me everything that has been backed up for Enrico from each of these different resources. So say again we lost an email, we need to go ahead and find the backed up copy of this email and restore that back to its original location. So I can go into the mailbox, I can click on his inbox, and I can search for or scroll for the email that is lost. So say for example this is the email that I lost. I need to have that recovered. I can select it here, and there's a few different options when it comes to recovery. I can restore just by using the defaults here, restore this email back to its original location in Enrico's inbox. I can restore this file to a different location, so maybe a different folder in a mailbox. If it's a OneDrive, I can restore it somewhere else. Or I can restore this to another user altogether. So say for example it's a situation where one of your employees is leaving the company and that user had ownership of some important emails or some important files on OneDrive, and you need that data migrated to a new user or a user that is taking over that role. So what you're able to do with vPlus is migrate that important data over to a new user. The other way, the other option when it comes to restore is download. What you can do with the download is actually prepare the file to be downloaded locally to this PC that I'm using. There may be situations where OneDrive files, team chats may be needed to be pulled off of the cloud and stored somewhere on-prem. So what you're able to do with the download is download that file locally to your machine and move that off to its destination. Now with that, we've gone ahead and walked through how to perform an ad hoc backup job, as well as schedule backups using backup SLAs. We've also walked through how to perform granular recovery of those emails, those files, those teams, those sites, whenever recovery is needed. Now, if you'd like to learn more about DPX vPlus, feel free to reach catalogicsoftware.com, and we'd be happy to provide you with more information. Thank you.